So hello and welcome to today's video. Now today begins a bit of a new series for the channel, with the debut of the first episode of the complete history of Buddy, which is a much more enhanced and in-depth look at the complete history of this beloved game. We have a hell of a lot to go over in this series, as we will be covering the entire history of Buddy, from its creation to the cancelled sequel and everything we can fit in between. So with that out of the way, let's begin. And today's episode is all about the origins of Buddy. And the history of the cult classic actually begins with Take-Two Interactive when they originally wanted to make a tactical shooter. So before I begin, I just want to say that this part might not seem like it's related to Buddy at all, as the majority of this video I will be speaking about an entirely different game series to begin with, but it does tie into Buddy, as you'll understand towards the end of the chapter. So let's go back to the late 1990s, and prior to the overwhelming success of Grand Theft Auto 3, which threw Rockstar Games into the spotlight, Take-Two Interactive were just an average publisher, definitely not the multi-billion conglomerate they are today. They had a few studios and a few decent titles, but nothing that would send consumers into a frenzy if they announced something new, like we've seen with Red Dead Redemption 2 and Grand Theft Auto 6. And during this time, a studio by the name of Zombie Studios and Ripcord Games are actively developing a series known as Spec Ops, which was a tactical shooter beginning with Spec Ops Rangers Lead the Way in 1998, and following yearly sequels. Zombie Studios developed the first two games and Ripcord Games took over development, and Take-Two Interactive took over publishing them in 2000, publishing 3 entries into the series. And Take-Two had acquired the rights to the entirety of the Spec Ops series in 2000-2001. Now, under Take-Two's belt, Spec Ops continued to be under development by a really obscure studio called Big Grub, and published by Gotham Games, who were owned by Take-Two Interactive. Think of it as like how Rockstar Games publish LA Noire even though they're not an independent studio. Anyway, during the same time that Take-Two had acquired the rights to the Spec Ops series, they were actively looking to acquire new studios. With the overwhelming and completely surprising success of Grand Theft Auto 3 and the hype of the then upcoming Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Take-Two was snatching studios left, right and centre and merging them into their newly formed Rockstar Games family, recently rebranding DMA Design into Rockstar North and acquiring studios such as Angel Studios and Tarantula Studios. And they turned their attention to a small studio by the name of Barking Dog, which was a breakaway studio located in Vancouver, Canada, and formed of employees from Radical Entertainment. Barking Dog Studios was a relatively young studio, only being formed in 1998 and having 4 games under their belts, and Take-Two Interactive had decided to buy them up for $3 million in August 2002, which when adjusted for inflation in 2022 is about $4.7 million. And as part of the contract agreed, Barking Dog Studios would become known as Rockstar Vancouver and become merged into the Rockstar Games family, meeting the same fate as DMA Design and Angel Studios. So why did Take-Two Interactive buy Barking Dog Studios? What made this studio look so attractive to them? Well, initially Take-Two Interactive were looking for studios who would develop the Spec Ops series, and initially this is exactly why they had their eyes on Barking Dog, as Barking Dog had quite a bit of history in the first-person shooter genre, as they had assisted Valve on the development of Counter-Strike during its beta, specifically Beta 5.0. Barking Dog did a fair amount of work for Valve during this time, making the maps Train and Back Alley, both maps that still actually appear in Counter-Strike Global Offensive today, and also having Easter eggs to Barking Dog in CS 1.6. But anyway, Barking Dog also helped make the game much more user-friendly and straightforward by making some quality of life improvements to both the hostage and bomb defusal game modes, and some HUD elements to make things much easier for newer players. Take-Two seemed to be really impressed by this, as they needed this kind of expertise, and Spec Ops itself as a series was always constantly compared with another incredibly popular franchise that's still insanely popular today. I'm not talking Counter-Strike or Battlefield or Call of Duty, but actually Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. And I don't mean Siege, I mean the older ones, which kind of feel like a completely different game in their own right, but anyway. These comparisons between Spec Ops and Rainbow Six were usually in a very negative light, as Spec Ops is often called the poor man's Rainbow Six, and Take-Two saw Barking Dog's experience with one of the most popular first-person shooters of all time, and still to this day Counter-Strike, to potentially become a solid rival to Ubisoft's Rainbow Six, and hopefully ditch the awful reputation of Spec Ops being nothing more than Rainbow Six ripoff. Keep in mind, this was at a time where Rockstar Games were not just an open world sandbox developer like they're best known for today. They had a variety of different styles, and every studio kind of worked on their own thing, like linear with Manhunt, open world with Grand Theft Auto, or racing with Midnight Club, so it would make sense for them to test the waters of a tactical shooter. And initially that's what Rockstar Vancouver were put down to work to do, as Take-Two confirmed a new entry into the Spec Ops series in their 2002 financial reports, which was released sometime in late summer 2002 before GTA Vice City was released. But it's reported that some higher-ups were trying to convince Take-Two that due to the overwhelming success of Grand Theft Auto 3 and the surrounding hype of GTA Vice City due for release in the coming months, maybe they struck gold of how revolutionary GTA 3 was. After all, it became one of the best-selling, influential and highest rated PlayStation 2 games of all time, and copies of the game were just flying off store shelves, and some people even rushed out to buy a PS2 just to play Grand Theft Auto 3. And it's rumoured that talks about this were trying to convince Take-Two they didn't need to necessarily rival Ubisoft in the tactical shooter genre anymore, as they had their own foot in the door with this mostly untapped market of open world sandbox games. But rather than just rely on big city open worlds, maybe experiment with alternative settings, something that would also be tried with another franchise they acquired from Capcom. And sometime around October 2002, Rockstar Vancouver were given the task of developing a brand new open world sandbox game based around the Grand Theft Auto open world formula, which as we know would eventually become Buddy, also being worked alongside this new Spec Ops entry. And so that wraps up part 1 of the complete history of Rockstar's Buddy. Stay tuned for episode 2, where we will be going over the entire history of Buddy's development. So thank you for watching this episode and have a great day.